The wind howled across the Wyoming plains like a wounded animal, carrying with it the bitter taste of winter's approach. Gray clouds hung low over the horizon, their bellies heavy with the promise of snow. In the distance, thunder rolled through the valleys, echoing off the barren hills where even the hardiest sage struggled to survive. Wyatt McCall stood at the edge of his property, watching the storm gather strength. His weathered hands gripped the rough wood of the fence post he'd been repairing when the wind picked up. At 34, he looked older, lines etched deep around his eyes from squinting into too many sunsets, searching for something that would never return. 2 years. It had been 2 years since the fire took everything that mattered. Sarah, the baby she'd been carrying, the house his father had built with his own hands, all reduced to ash and memory in a single night while he'd been in town, drinking whiskey and playing cards like a fool. The new house stood behind him now, smaller and plainer than the old one. He'd built it alone, refusing help from neighbors who'd offered. Every board, every nail was a penance, though he knew no amount of work could wash the guilt from his soul. A horse's whinny drew his attention to the barn. His mare, Buttercup, sensed the coming storm. Time to get the animal secured. As he walked back, his boots crunching on the frost-brittle grass, Wyatt made a decision he'd been wrestling with for months. Inside the house, he sat at the rough-hewn table and pulled out a sheet of paper. His last one. The pen felt foreign in his calloused hand as he began to write. To the Matrimonial Times, St. Louis, Missouri. I am a rancher in Wyoming Territory seeking a wife. I offer a sound roof, adequate food, and fair treatment. I need someone who can cook, tend a garden, and endure isolation. I do not seek love or affection, only a helpmate for practical purposes. No children at present. Woman should be of hardy constitution and realistic expectations. Wyatt McCall, Sage Creek, Wyoming. He sealed the letter, knowing it read cold as a winter morning. Good. Better she know from the start what she'd be getting, or rather, what she wouldn't be getting. His heart had burned up in that fire, and he had no intention of finding another. 800 miles away in St. Louis. Charlotte Bellamy sat in a boarding house room that smelled of cabbage and despair. The newspaper in her hands trembled slightly as she read through the matrimonial advertisements for the third time. Her money would last perhaps another week, 2 if she ate only once a day. At 26, she was still beautiful enough to draw men's eyes on the street, but beauty had brought her nothing but trouble. Her reflection in the cracked mirror showed dark hair pinned severely back, green eyes that had seen too much, and a mouth that had forgotten how to smile without calculation. She'd been using the name Charlotte Bellamy for 3 months now. Before that, she'd been Charlotte Mills in Kansas City, and before that, she'd been Jesse Rourke's woman, though she'd never been his wife. Not that marriage would have made him any less dangerous or her any less foolish for loving him. The sound of boots in the hallway made her freeze. Heavy steps, like Jesse's. But when they passed by her door without stopping, she remembered to breathe. He couldn't have found her. She'd been careful, so careful. Her eyes fell on one advertisement again. Wyoming, that was far enough, surely. And the man seemed to want exactly what she could offer, work without attachment. She had no interest in another man's love. Love was what had led her to follow Jesse from town to town, turning a blind eye to the blood on his hands and the wanted posters bearing his likeness. Charlotte dipped her pen in ink and began to write her response, choosing her words carefully. She presented herself as a widow. Partially true. She was dead to her old life. Experienced in household management, she'd kept house for Jesse between his jobs. And seeking a quiet situation, God, how she craved quiet after years of running. She was sealing the envelope when the door burst open. Her heart stopped. Jesse stood in the doorway, his dark hair longer than she remembered, his clothes dusty from hard riding. Those blue eyes that had once made her weak now filled her with terror. The scar on his left cheek, earned in a knife fight in Dodge City, seemed more pronounced in the dim light. "Hello, darlin'," he said, closing the door behind him. "Took me a while to track you down. Charlotte Bellamy? That's creative. How did you find me?" Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "Money opens a lot of doors, and you left quite a trail. Sweet girl. Kansas City, Des Moines. Now here." He moved closer, and she could smell the whiskey on his breath, see the pistol at his hip. "Thought you could just leave, after everything?" "After everything?" Charlotte stood, anger momentarily overcoming fear. "You mean after you shot that marshal in Colorado? After you robbed that stage and left those passengers to freeze? I couldn't do it anymore. Jessie, I couldn't watch you kill—" His hand cracked across her face, sending her stumbling into the wall. "You loved it when I was spending that money on pretty dresses and hotel rooms." She tasted blood. "I loved you, not what you did." Jessie's expression softened, and for a moment she saw the man she'd fallen for 5 years ago. Charming, passionate, promising her the world. He reached out to touch her reddening cheek. "Come back with me. Charlotte, I've got a job planned in Texas, big score. We can go to Mexico after, live like royalty." "No." The word came out firm. "Final." His face hardened again. "You think you can just walk away? You know what I've done. You could talk. I've never said a word. I never would. Maybe not. Or maybe you get lonely one night. Have a little too much wine. Start telling stories to some new man." He grabbed the letter from her table. Read the address. "Wyoming, you're running to some cowboy. It's a business arrangement. I need work. He needs help. That's all." Jessie crumpled the letter and threw it into the cold fireplace. "You're not going anywhere." But Charlotte had learned things in their years together. When he reached for her again, she was ready with the Derringer she'd bought in Kansas City. The small gun pressed against his ribs made him freeze. "I'm leaving, Jessie, tomorrow. And you're going to let me—" He laughed, but she heard the edge in it. "You won't shoot me. I shot that man in Tucson who tried to force himself on me while you were playing poker. Remember? You taught me how." She pressed the gun harder. "Walk out that door. Don't follow me." For a long moment, they stood frozen. Then Jessie stepped back, his hands raised mockingly. "All right, darling, you win. For now." He moved to the door, then turned. "But this isn't over. You can run to the ends of the earth, and I'll find you. You're mine. Charlotte, you'll always be mine." He pulled something from his pocket and forced it into her free hand, a folded paper. Then he was gone, his boots echoing down the hall. Charlotte's hands shook as she unfolded the note. In Jessie's scrawled handwriting, "I'll find you." She sank onto the bed, the Derringer falling from nerveless fingers. Tomorrow. She had to leave tomorrow. She'd write to that rancher again, send it from the next town. Wyoming was far enough. It had to be. Outside her window, thunder crashed closer now. Charlotte packed her few belongings by lamplight, trying not to think about Jessie out there in the darkness. Watching, always watching. The train ticket would take most of her money, but she'd make it work. She had to, because one thing was certain. The next time Jessie found her, one of them wouldn't walk away. As she folded her spare dress, Charlotte allowed herself one moment of bitter irony. She was trading one form of isolation for another, one damaged man for another. But at least this Wyatt McCall was honest about having nothing to offer beyond shelter and work. That suited her fine. She was done with love, done with promises, done with men who thought they owned her. All she wanted now was a place to hide and a chance to forget. The storm broke over St. Louis that night, rain lashing against the windows. Charlotte lay awake, the Derringer under her pillow. Jessie's note burned to ash in the fireplace. Come morning, she would begin the long journey to Wyoming territory, to a man who wanted nothing from her but honest work. She told herself that was enough. It had to be. The frost-covered bucket handle bit into Charlotte's palms as she hauled water from the well for the third time that morning. Her city-softened hands, already blistered from yesterday's work, protested with each pull of the rope. The Wyoming wind cut through her wool dress like it was made of paper. Nothing like the winters she'd known in St. Louis. 2 weeks. She'd been at Wyatt McCall's ranch for 2 weeks. and every muscle in her body ached from the unrelenting work. Drawing water, splitting kindling, cooking over a temperamental wood stove that seemed determined to either burn everything or leave it raw. The silence was the hardest part. Endless hours with only the wind and the occasional lowing of cattle for company. Wyatt barely spoke beyond the necessary instructions. "Water trough needs filling. Storm coming. Help me get the horses in. Supper's getting cold." He moved through his days like a ghost, present but not really there, his gray eyes looking through her rather than at her. She didn't mind. After Jesse's constant need for attention, for admiration, for reassurance that she belonged to him, Wyatt's indifference was almost restful. He'd given her the small room off the kitchen, barely bigger than a pantry but private, with a door she could bar at night. He never came near it after dark. Inside the house, she set the water to heating and began preparing the midday meal. Beans again, with salt pork and the last of the preserved vegetables from the root cellar. She was learning to make the supplies stretch, understanding now why frontier wives were praised for making something from nothing. The door banged open, admitting Wyatt in a swirl of snow. He stomped his boots on the threshold, a habit she'd come to appreciate after sweeping the floors countless times. "Found ice in the water trough," he said, unwinding his scarf. "Winter's coming early." Charlotte nodded, ladling beans onto plates. They ate in customary silence at opposite ends of the table. She'd given up trying to make conversation after the first few days. Questions about the ranch were answered briefly. Questions about anything else weren't answered at all. But she watched him when he wasn't looking, noticed how his hands sometimes paused over his coffee cup, trembling slightly. How he'd stare at the corner where she'd seen a rocking chair in an old photograph, now empty. How he still set out 2 cups some mornings before catching himself. After the meal, as she washed dishes, she heard it again, the soft clink of metal against metal. Glancing over her shoulder, she saw him absently touching something beneath his shirt. A chain, the wedding ring. She'd realized that he couldn't bear to put away, but couldn't bear to wear properly either. That afternoon, while Wyatt worked on repairing the barn roof, Charlotte tackled the mountain of mending that had accumulated. His clothes were more whole than fabric in places, neglected for who knew how long. As she worked, her mind wandered to her own hidden burdens. Jesse's note, tucked into the lining of her traveling case. "I'll find you." Every night she thought about burning it, and every night she didn't. Some twisted part of her needed the reminder of what she was running from, why she could never let her guard down completely. A sound made her look up, hoofbeats approaching. Her needle paused mid-stitch as fear coiled in her stomach. But it was only Wyatt, leading his horse around from the barn. The animal favored its left front leg. "Stone bruise," Wyatt said when he saw her watching through the window. "Needs rest." That evening, as darkness crept across the plains, Charlotte noticed Wyatt favoring his right shoulder as he came in for supper. "You're hurt," she said, the words out before she could stop them. He shrugged, then winced. "Pulled something working on the roof. Let me see." "It's nothing." But she was already moving, some instinct overriding the careful distance they'd maintained. "Sit," she commanded, surprised by the authority in her voice. Perhaps he was surprised too, because he sat. Charlotte moved behind him, hesitating only a moment before placing her hands on his shoulder. The muscles were knotted tight as rope beneath his shirt. "You need liniment," she said, working her thumbs against the worst of the knots. He made a sound that might have been agreement or pain. She kept working, feeling the tension slowly release under her hands. Neither of them spoke, but the silence had shifted, become something different from their usual careful avoidance. When she finally stepped back, he turned to look at her. For the first time since she'd arrived, he really seemed to see her. "Thank you," he said quietly. That night, Charlotte lay awake listening to the wind howl around the house. In the darkness, she allowed herself to think about the moment her hands had been on his shoulders, the warmth of him through the worn fabric. It meant nothing. It couldn't mean anything. She was here to work, to hide, to survive. Nothing more. But sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams of gentle hands and gray eyes that saw her truly. She woke to the sound of horses, multiple horses, moving fast, heart pounding. She crept to the window and peered out into the pre-dawn darkness. Nothing visible, but the sound was fading, heading toward town, not approaching the ranch. Still, she dressed quickly and barred her door again. Jessie's note seeming to burn against her skin where she'd hidden it inside her corset. When Wyatt knocked to tell her it was time to start breakfast, she jumped like a spooked cat. "Just me," he said through the door. And was that a hint of concern in his voice? The day passed normally. Water, cooking, mending, the endless cycle of ranch work. But Charlotte couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every sound made her tense. When a jackrabbit burst from the brush near the chicken coop, she nearly screamed. "You all right?" Wyatt asked when he found her pressed against the coop wall, hand over her racing heart. "Fine, just startled." He studied her for a long moment. "You're jumpier than a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs." Despite everything, she almost smiled at the expression. "I'm not used to the wildlife yet." He didn't look convinced, but he let it go. "Snow's coming tonight. Real storm. Better bring in extra wood." They worked side by side as the sky darkened, stacking wood on the porch and in the box by the stove. The first fat flakes were falling when they finally went inside, both breathing hard from the exertion. "That should hold us," Wyatt said, brushing snow from his hair. The gesture was so unexpectedly boyish that Charlotte found herself staring. He caught her look and stilled, something flickering in his eyes before he turned away. "I'll see to the animals one more time," he said, and was gone before she could respond. Alone. Charlotte pressed her palms against the warm stove and tried to calm her racing thoughts. It was the isolation, that's all. The constant vigilance. Living with a stranger who might as well be a ghost. Any human moment would feel significant in this emptiness. She had supper waiting when he returned, snow thick on his shoulders and ice in his beard. He ate quickly, efficiently, but she noticed him wince when he reached for the salt. "Your shoulder's still paining you." "It's fine." "It's not." She stood. Decision made. "Where's the liniment?" "Charlotte." "Where is it?" "Wyatt." He blinked at the use of his given name. They'd been Mr. McCall and Mrs. Bellamy until now, maintaining the fiction of propriety. "Barn," he said finally. "Tack room, top shelf." She bundled herself in her shawl and made the trek to the barn, finding the bottle after some searching. When she returned, he was sitting by the stove, shirt already loosened at the neck. This time, she worked in silence, but it was a different quality of quiet. Warmer, somehow, more companionable. When her hands grew tired, she simply rested them on his shoulders for a moment, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing. "My wife used to do this," he said suddenly, so quietly she almost missed it. "Sarah, she had strong hands from years of farm work." Charlotte held her breath, afraid to break whatever spell had loosened his tongue. "Lost her 2 years ago. Fire took the house while I was in town. Her and the baby both." His voice was steady, but she felt the tremor run through him. "My fault. Should have been here." "Fires happen," Charlotte said softly. "It wasn't. I was drunk." He cut her off. "Gambling in town while my pregnant wife burned." The raw pain in his voice made her hands still. Without thinking, she moved around the chair and knelt beside him, looking up into his face. The devastation she saw there took her breath away. "You couldn't have known," she whispered. "Doesn't matter. They're still gone." Impulsively, she reached up and touched his face, feeling the roughness of his beard against her palm. He closed his eyes, leaning into the touch for just a moment before pulling away. "You should get some sleep," he said, standing abruptly. "Storm will make tomorrow's chores harder." Dismissed. Charlotte rose and headed for her room. At the doorway, she paused. "Wyatt, thank you for telling me." He nodded once, not turning from the stove. She closed her door softly behind her. knowing that something fundamental had shifted between them. The careful distance was still there, but it had cracks in it now. Places where something else might grow, given time. Outside, the storm raged on, sealing them inside their small world of wood and stone. Charlotte touched the place in her corset where Jesse's note hid, for once not thinking of it as a threat, but as a reminder. She'd run from one damaged man to another. True, but Wyatt's damage was clean, born of loss and guilt. Jesse's was something else, a darkness that had always been there, waiting for an excuse to surface. She could work with guilt. She understood guilt. It was the one thing, perhaps, that they could share. The blizzard lasted 3 days, sealing them inside while snow piled against the windows and wind screamed like a living thing. By the second day, they'd given up maintaining separate spaces, both gravitating toward the stove's warmth. Charlotte worked on mending while Wyatt repaired tack, the silence between them no longer strained but companionable. "My father taught me to work leather," Wyatt said on the third morning, his hands moving surely over a broken bridle. "Said a man who couldn't fix his own gear wasn't worth much out here." Charlotte looked up from her sewing. He'd been talking more these past days, small revelations dropping like pebbles into still water. "He sounds like a practical man. He built this place with his own hands. Him and my mother. Took them 15 years to make it profitable." Wyatt's jaw tightened. "Took me one night to nearly lose it all." She wanted to tell him to stop punishing himself, but she understood too well the weight of guilt. Instead, she asked, "How did you save it?" "Neighbors helped rebuild, Tom Morrison especially. He owns the spread to the south. Lost his own wife the year before. Knew what I was going through." Wyatt tested the bridle's strength. "Good people out here. They take care of their own." That afternoon, the wind finally died. Wyatt ventured out to check the animals while Charlotte watched from the window. The world had transformed into an ocean of white, drifts reaching halfway up the barn door. She saw him struggle through the snow, his tall figure dark against all that brightness, and felt an unexpected tightness in her chest. When he returned, his face was red with cold, ice crystals in his eyebrows. "Lost 2 chickens, he reported, warming his hands by the stove. "Rest seem all right. Horses are restless. Let me make you something hot." She busied herself with coffee and the last of the breakfast biscuits, aware of him watching her move about the kitchen. When she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away immediately. "Charlotte," his voice was rough, "I need to ask you something." Her heart stuttered, but she kept her face calm. "Yes?" "You're running from something, someone." It wasn't a question. "I've seen the way you check the windows, how you tense up at hoofbeats. Are you going to bring trouble to my door?" The truth stuck in her throat. She thought of Jesse's note, hidden in her corset, of blood in Tucson streets and the weight of a derringer in her hand. "There was a man," she said carefully, "back in St. Louis. He wasn't good. I left to get away from him." Wyatt studied her face. "Is he likely to follow?" "I don't know." It wasn't quite a lie. Jesse had said he'd find her, but whether he'd actually come this far, I hope not. "Was he your husband?" "No." She met his eyes squarely. "But he thought he owned me just the same." Something flickered across Wyatt's face. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. He nodded slowly. "All right. But if trouble comes, I need to know. This ranch is all I have left. Charlotte, I can't lose it too." "I understand." That night, she couldn't sleep. The house creaked and settled around her, and every sound made her think of Jesse out there in the snow, watching, waiting. Finally, she gave up and crept out to the main room, planning to sit by the dying stove fire. Wyatt was already there, staring into the flames with that 1,000-yard look she'd come to recognize. He glanced up when she entered but didn't speak, just shifted to make room on the bench beside him. She sat, careful to leave space between them, and for a long while, they simply shared the quiet. The fire popped and hissed, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Can't sleep either," he asked eventually. "Too much quiet," she admitted. "After years in cities, the silence out here is loud," he finished. "I know. First winter after Sarah died, I thought I'd go mad from it." She pulled her shawl tighter. "How did you stand it?" "Work, sunrise to sundown, until I was too tired to think. Some days I still—" He trailed off, then seemed to force himself to continue. "Some days I still talk to her. Tell her about the ranch, the horses, like she's just in the next room." Charlotte's throat tightened. Impulsively, she reached over and took his hand. His fingers were rough, calloused, but warm. After a moment's hesitation, he turned his palm up and intertwined their fingers. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For your loss, for everything." He squeezed her hand gently. "We're all running from something, I suppose. You from your past, me from mine. Maybe that makes us well-matched after all." The word matched hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility. Charlotte knew she should pull away, maintain the boundaries that kept them both safe. Instead, she shifted closer, until her shoulder touched his. "Tell me about her," she said softly. "Sarah, what was she like?" Wyatt was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, small, barely came up to my shoulder, but fierce as a wildcat when riled. Brown hair that went golden in summer. Sang while she worked, hymns mostly, but sometimes songs her mother taught her from the old country. Charlotte listened as he painted a picture of a woman full of life and laughter, who'd tamed his wild ways and made him want to be better. A woman nothing like herself, with her secrets and her shadows. "She would have liked you," Wyatt said suddenly. "You're stronger than you know. Survivor. She'd respect that." "You don't know what I've survived," Charlotte said before she could stop herself. "No," he agreed. "But I recognize the look. Same one I see in the mirror every morning." They sat in silence again, hands still linked, watching the fire die to embers. Finally, Charlotte felt her eyes growing heavy. "We should sleep," she murmured. "Morning comes early." "In a minute." Wyatt's thumb traced small circles on her palm. "This is nice. Haven't felt—" He didn't finish, but she understood. "I know," she whispered. "Me too." When she finally returned to her room, she felt his absence like a physical ache. Lying in her narrow bed, she pressed her palm to her cheek, trying to hold on to the warmth of his touch. It was dangerous, this growing connection. She'd come here to hide, not to feel, not to want, but want she did, with an intensity that frightened her. Want his quiet strength, his broken honesty, the way he looked at her like she was becoming real to him. Want to ease the pain in his eyes, to give him something to live for besides penance. The next morning brought brilliant sunshine and the slow work of digging out. They labored side by side, shoveling paths to the barn and coop, breaking ice from the water troughs. The shared effort felt different now, charged with awareness. When Wyatt helped her over a drift, his hands lingered at her waist. When she passed him the water bucket, their fingers tangled for a moment. That evening, exhausted from the day's work, Charlotte dozed off while darning socks by the fire. She woke to find a blanket draped over her shoulders and Wyatt sitting nearby, a book open in his lap but his eyes on her. "How long was I asleep?" "Hour or so." He looked away, color rising in his cheeks. "You looked peaceful. Didn't want to wake you." She sat up, the blanket sliding down, and noticed something glinting at his throat. The chain had worked loose from his shirt, the wedding ring hanging free. Without thinking, she reached out and touched it. He went very still. "I'm sorry." She started to pull back, but he caught her hand, pressing it against his chest. She could feel his heart beating fast beneath her palm. "Don't be," he said roughly. Sometimes I forget what it feels like, to be touched with kindness." Charlotte's breath caught, slowly, carefully. She leaned forward until her forehead rested against his. They stayed that way, breathing the same air, balanced on the edge of something irreversible. "Wyatt," she whispered. I know, he said. I know we shouldn't. You're running from something. I'm chained to the past. But Charlotte, She silenced him with the gentlest press of her lips to his. Barely a kiss. More a promise of possibility. When she pulled back, his eyes were closed, his face transformed by something that might have been hope. We have time, she said softly. No need to rush. He nodded, opening his eyes to look at her with such raw vulnerability it made her chest ache. Time, he repeated. Yes, but even as she smiled at him, even as they returned to their separate rooms with the ghost of that kiss between them, Charlotte heard the echo of Jesse's voice. I'll find you. Time might be the one thing they didn't have. The morning Charlotte finally told him the truth. She was kneading bread dough with more force than necessary, flour dusting her arms up to the elbows. Wyatt sat at the table, mending a harness, but she could feel him watching her. You're going to beat that dough to death, he observed mildly. She paused, looking down at her white-knuckled hands. 3 weeks had passed since their kiss by the fire. 3 weeks of careful dancing around each other, of touches that lingered and looks that said too much. The connection between them had grown stronger, but so had her guilt about the secrets she kept. Wyatt, I need to tell you something. He set down the harness, giving her his full attention. All right. Charlotte wiped her hands on her apron, trying to find the words. The man I was running from? His name is Jesse Rourke. He's wanted by the law. Wyatt's expression didn't change, but she saw his shoulders tense. What for? Robbery. Assault. She forced herself to meet his eyes. Murder. And you were with him? For 5 years. The admission tasted bitter. I was young, foolish. He was charming, exciting. By the time I understood what he really was, I was in too deep. Every time I tried to leave, she touched her cheek, remembering other bruises, older fears. He hurt you. It wasn't a question. Wyatt's voice had gone dangerously quiet. Yes, but I stayed. God help me. I stayed because I thought I loved him, thought I could change him. She laughed, sharp and bitter. Then in Colorado, he killed a marshal during a bank robbery. Shot him in the back while he was checking on his wounded deputy. That's when I knew I had to run. Wyatt stood slowly, crossed to where she stood by the counter. Is he looking for you? He found me in St. Louis the night before I left for here. She pulled Jesse's note from her bodice, hands trembling as she showed it to him. He said he'd find me again. Wyatt read the brief message, his jaw tightening. Then, deliberately, he took the paper to the stove and fed it to the flames. No more secrets, he said, turning back to her. If he comes, we face him together. Understood? Wyatt, you don't know what he's capable of. I know what I'm capable of. He interrupted. This is my land, my home, our home. He paused, seeming to realize what he'd said. I won't let him hurt you, Charlotte, not while I'm breathing. She wanted to weep at the fierce protectiveness in his voice. Instead, she nodded, throat tight. All right, no more secrets. But the very next day, as if summoned by her confession, trouble arrived. Wyatt had ridden to the north pasture to check on the cattle. Charlotte was alone, hanging laundry on the line despite the cold, when she noticed smoke rising from beyond the barn. Not chimney smoke, thicker, darker, wrong, heart racing. She ran toward it, rounding the barn to find the chicken coop ablaze. The birds inside were squawking in panic, beating against the walls. Without thinking, she grabbed a bucket and ran for the well. But by the time she returned, the structure was fully engulfed. That's when she saw it, words carved fresh into the barn wall. Found you? No, she whispered, dropping the bucket. No, no, no. The sound of horses made her spin around. But it was Wyatt, riding hard. Having seen the smoke, he leaped from the saddle before his horse had fully stopped. What happened? He's here, Charlotte said, voice shaking. Jesse's here. Wyatt saw the carved message, his face going hard as stone. He pulled his rifle from the saddle. Get in the house. Bar the door. Wyatt, now. "Charlotte!" She ran, hearing him calling for his horse to scatter the surviving chickens away from the fire. Inside, she barred the door as ordered, then loaded the shotgun Wyatt kept by the fireplace. Her hands were steady now. The old survival instincts Jesse himself had taught her taking over. Time crawled. The fire crackled outside, dying down. There wasn't much to burn in a chicken coop. Charlotte positioned herself where she could see both windows, shotgun ready. Finally, Wyatt's voice. "Charlotte, it's me. Open up." She unbarred the door to find him soot-stained and grim. "Fire's out. Lost the coop and half the flock, but the barn's safe." He moved past her, checking windows, his rifle never leaving his hand. "He's gone. Whoever did it. Tracks lead east, toward town." It was Jesse. That message. He used to leave notes like that. It's how he marks his territory. She was surprised by how calm she sounded. "He's playing with us, with me. He won't attack directly. Not yet. He'll want me to stew in fear first." "Then he doesn't know you very well," Wyatt said. "You're not the cowering type." Despite everything, she almost smiled. "I used to be. Not anymore." He set his rifle by the door, then crossed to her. "Charlotte, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." She nodded, bracing herself. "Do you still have feelings for him?" The question hit her like a physical blow. "What? No." "Wyatt, how could you think you were with him 5 years? That's a long time. And fear can get tangled up with other things." Charlotte set down the shotgun carefully, then took his face in her hands. "Listen to me. What I felt for Jesse died the moment I saw that marshal's blood on the bank floor. Maybe before that. What we had was possession, control. Not love, never love. And what is this?" His hands covered hers. "What we have? I don't know," she admitted. "But it's real. It's clean. It's the first thing in my life that doesn't feel like a trap." He pulled her against him then, holding her tight. She pressed her face to his chest, breathing in the scent of smoke and sweat and safety. For a moment, the world narrowed to just this, the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "We should go to town," Wyatt said against her hair. "Talk to the sheriff." "No, Jesse has friends everywhere. If the law gets involved, he'll disappear. Wait until we think we're safe, then come back worse than before." She pulled back to look at him. "This has to end between him and me. Between him and us," Wyatt corrected. "I told you, we face this together." That night, they took turns keeping watch. Charlotte dozed fitfully on the bench by the fire while Wyatt sat by the window. In the small hours, they switched. The house felt like a fortress under siege, every shadow a potential threat. Near dawn, Charlotte heard it, the soft nicker of a horse. Too close. She touched Wyatt's shoulder, and he came awake instantly, alert. "Horse," she whispered. "Northwest." They waited, tense, but no attack came. When the sun finally rose, Wyatt ventured out to find a package on the porch, Charlotte's traveling dress, the one she'd left behind in St. Louis, torn to ribbons and splattered with what looked like blood. "Pig's blood, probably," Charlotte said, trying to keep her voice level. "He always was theatrical." "This ends now," Wyatt said, jaw tight with fury. "I'm going to town, getting the sheriff and a posse." "No!" Charlotte grabbed his arm. "Please, you don't understand. Jesse won't fight fair. He'll burn the whole ranch, shoot you from ambush, anything to get what he wants. And what he wants is to punish me for leaving." "Then what do you suggest?" Charlotte took a shuddering breath. "We wait. He'll come to us eventually. He won't be able to resist confronting me face to face. When he does," she met Wyatt's eyes. "When he does, we end it." Wyatt studied her for a long moment. "You're talking about killing him. I'm talking about surviving." Her voice was steel. "He won't stop, Wyatt, not until one of us is dead." "All right," he said finally. "We do this your way. But Charlotte, I won't let you face him alone." "I know." She touched his cheek, feeling the stubble beneath her palm. "That's what makes you different from him. That's what makes this worth fighting for." They spent the day preparing, checking weapons, securing the animals that remained, reinforcing the house. As they worked, Charlotte found herself watching Wyatt with new eyes. The way he moved with quiet efficiency, the capable strength of his hands, the determined set of his shoulders. Jesse had been flash and fire, all surface charm hiding rot beneath. Wyatt was bedrock, solid, true, dependable. That evening, as they ate a cold supper, unwilling to be distracted by cooking, Wyatt reached across the table and took her hand. "When this is over," he said, "when he's gone and we're safe, I want to do this proper. Court you the way you deserve, take you to town dances, Sunday picnics, all of it." Charlotte's eyes burned with unshed tears. "I'd like that. And then," he continued, voice rough with emotion, "if you'll have me, I want to marry you. Real marriage, not this arrangement we started with." "I want to wake up beside you every morning knowing you chose to be there." "Wyatt," she breathed. "I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other. But Charlotte, Yes," she interrupted. "When this is over." "Yes." He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. In that moment, despite the danger lurking outside, despite the fear and uncertainty, Charlotte felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The next morning brought an unexpected respite. No burned buildings, no threatening messages, just the normal sounds of a ranch waking up. Charlotte found herself almost wishing Jesse would make his move. The waiting was eating at her nerves like acid. "I'm riding to town," Wyatt announced over breakfast. "Need supplies, and I want to send a telegram to the minister in Sageville about performing a wedding." Charlotte's coffee cup paused halfway to her lips. "You're going alone?" "Just for a few hours. I'll be back before dark." He stood, checking his pistol before holstering it. "Keep the shotgun close. Bar the door behind me." "Wyatt, what if he's watching? What if he follows you?" He crossed to her chair, cupped her face gently. "Then I'll deal with it. But we can't stop living. Charlotte, that's letting him win." She wanted to argue, but saw the wisdom in his words. They couldn't remain prisoners in their own home forever. "Be careful. Always am." He kissed her forehead, lingering for a moment. "I love you." The words hung in the air between them, unexpected and perfect. Charlotte's throat closed with emotion. "I love you too." His smile transformed his usually serious face. "Hold that thought till I get back." After he left, Charlotte threw herself into chores, trying to outrun her anxiety. She fed the remaining chickens, now housed temporarily in the barn, mucked stalls, and started a pot of stew for dinner. The familiar work helped calm her nerves, though she kept the shotgun within reach at all times. It was early afternoon when she heard the rider approaching. Her heart leaped. Wyatt, returning early, but the hoofbeats were wrong, the rhythm unfamiliar. She grabbed the shotgun and moved to the window. Jesse Rourke sat his horse in the yard like he owned the place, still devastatingly handsome despite the hard living written on his face. His dark hair was longer, wilder, and a new scar crossed his left eyebrow. But those blue eyes were the same, cold as winter ice when the charm wasn't turned on. "Charlotte, darling," he called. "I know you're in there. Come on out. We need to talk." She stayed silent, shotgun ready. "Now don't be like that," Jesse continued, dismounting with lazy grace. "I rode all this way to see you. Least you can do is show some hospitality. Get off this land, Jesse." Her voice carried through the door, steady and firm. He laughed, that rich sound that used to make her weak. "That's no way to greet an old friend. Come on out, or I'll come in. Your choice." Charlotte unbarred the door and stepped onto the porch, shotgun leveled at his chest. "Far enough." Jesse stopped, hands spread in mock surrender. "There's my girl, looking good. Charlotte, ranch life agrees with you. I'm not your girl, never was." "Sure about that. Seem to recall you saying different that night in Abilene, and Denver, and that hotel, and what do you want, Jesse?" His smile faded. "Want what's mine. You. I don't belong to you. I don't belong to anyone. That's where you're wrong. Darlin', see, you know things, seen things. That makes you a liability if you're not with me. I've never said a word to anyone about your activities. Not yet. But what about when your new man finds out everything? When he realizes the woman sharing his bed helped plan the Coreyville job? That she held the horses while I cleared out that bank in Tucson? Charlotte's stomach turned. I didn't know what you were planning. Law won't see it that way. Jesse moved closer, slow and easy like approaching a spooked horse. You're an accessory, Charlotte, to all of it. But lucky for you, I'm feeling generous. Come with me now, and all's forgiven. No. No? His eyes hardened. You'd rather hang than come back where you belong. I'd rather die than go anywhere with you. That can be arranged. His hand moved toward his gun, then paused. Where's your rancher? Out playing cowboy while you're here all alone. He'll be back soon. Sure he will. Tell you what, I'm going to give you one last chance. Pack your things. We ride out together, peaceful-like. Or I wait for him to come home and put a bullet in his head the moment he steps off his horse. Your choice. Charlotte's hands tightened on the shotgun. You won't get the chance. Won't I? Jesse grinned, that predator's smile she'd once found exciting. I'm faster than you, darlin'. Always was. And that scattergun won't do much good if you can't pull the trigger. Wanna bet? Something in her voice must have warned him, because his eyes narrowed. You've changed. Yes, she said simply. I have. It's that rancher, isn't it? You spread your legs for him, and now you think you're respectable. Think you can wash off what you are with a wedding ring. Get off this property. Jesse, last warning. He studied her for a long moment. Then, surprising her, he backed toward his horse. All right, I'll go. But this isn't over. Charlotte, your man's going to learn what you really are. And when he throws you out like the trash you are, I'll be waiting. He mounted up, touched his hat in a mocking salute. Give my regards to the widower. Tell him to watch his back. Charlotte kept the shotgun trained on him until he disappeared over the ridge. Only then did she let herself shake, sinking down onto the porch steps. Jesse's words echoed in her mind. Accessory, accomplice, all those times she'd held horses, kept watch, thought she was just being supportive of the man she loved. How much had she really known? How much had she chosen not to see? When Wyatt returned at dusk, he found her still on the porch, shotgun across her knees. Charlotte, he was off his horse in an instant, rushing to her. What happened? Are you hurt? Jesse was here. Her voice sounded hollow to her own ears. He's gone. For now. Wyatt pulled her to her feet, checking her over for injuries. Did he? No, we talked. He made threats. She met his eyes, needing to say this before she lost her nerve. Wyatt, there are things about my time with him. Things I did. Stop. He gripped her shoulders. I don't care what you did before. You're not that person anymore. You don't understand. I helped him. Wyatt, maybe not directly, but I was there. I knew what he was, and I stayed. That makes me human, Wyatt finished. It makes you human. We all have things we'd undo if we could. God knows I do. This is different. Is it? I left my pregnant wife alone to go drink and gamble. She died because of my selfishness. You think that makes me any better than you? Charlotte stared at him, seeing her own pain reflected in his eyes. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Maybe that's why we understand each other. He pulled her close, and she let herself lean into his strength. Did he say when he'd be back? No, but he won't wait long. Patience was never Jesse's strong suit. Then we'll be ready. Wyatt's voice was grim. I brought back more ammunition, and I talked to Tom Morrison in town. He offered to send a couple of his hands over if we need help. No, Jesse will just wait until they leave. This needs to be settled between us. That night, they pushed the kitchen table against the wall and laid out their weapons. Wyatt's rifle and pistol. Charlotte's shotgun. An old Colt revolver Wyatt had found in the barn. They cleaned and loaded each one, working in companionable silence. Teach me, Charlotte said suddenly. The rifle. I've never used one. Wyatt looked surprised but nodded. All right, come here. He showed her how to hold it, how to sight down the barrel, how to squeeze the trigger smooth and easy. Standing behind her, his arms around her to guide her hands. Charlotte felt safe despite everything. This was what partnership meant, not possession, but standing together against whatever came. "You're a quick learner," he murmured against her ear. She turned in his arms, rifle forgotten. "I have a good teacher." Their lips met, desperate and hungry. The kiss tasted of fear and determination and something else, life, fierce and defiant in the face of death. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Wyatt rested his forehead against hers. "When this is over," he began. "I know," she whispered. "When this is over." But first, they had to survive what was coming. They made love that night with a tender desperation, knowing it might be their last chance. In the darkness of Wyatt's room, their room now, Charlotte traced the planes of his body like she was memorizing him. Every scar, every muscle, every place that made him gasp when she touched it. "I love you," she told him over and over, as if the words were a prayer that could keep them safe. "And I love you," he answered, holding her like she might disappear if he let go. Afterward, they lay entwined, neither willing to sleep and waste these precious hours. Charlotte told him stories of her childhood before Jessie, the little farm in Ohio where she'd grown up. Wyatt shared memories of building this ranch with his father, of meeting Sarah at a barn dance, of dreams deferred but not destroyed. As dawn approached, they heard it. Horses, multiple horses, moving fast. "He brought friends," Charlotte said, already reaching for her clothes. Wyatt was already up, pulling on his pants and boots. "How many, you think?" She listened. "3, maybe 4. "All right." He checked his pistol, calm and steady. "Remember what I taught you. And Charlotte, whatever happens, know that these weeks with you have been worth everything." She kissed him hard. "Don't you dare say goodbye to me. Wyatt McCall. We're going to survive this. Both of us." He smiled, that rare, transformative expression that made her heart ache. "Yes, ma'am." They took their positions, Wyatt at the front window with his rifle, Charlotte at the side window with the shotgun. Outside, the horses had stopped just beyond rifle range. Jessie's voice carried on the morning air. "Last chance. Charlotte, come out now, or we burn you out." Charlotte looked at Wyatt. He nodded, jaw set with determination. "Go to hell, Jessie," she shouted back. "Have it your way, darlin'." The first shot shattered the front window, showering glass across the floor. Charlotte ducked, heart hammering, as Wyatt returned fire with his rifle. The early morning erupted in gunfire and shouting. "Kitchen door!" Wyatt yelled, and Charlotte scrambled to cover the back entrance. Through the broken window, she could see 4 riders spreading out, trying to flank the house. Jessie sat his horse in the center, directing the others with sharp gestures. A man Charlotte didn't recognize tried to rush the porch. Wyatt's rifle cracked, and the attacker stumbled back, clutching his shoulder. But another was already at the side window. Charlotte swung the shotgun up and fired, the blast deafening in the enclosed space. The man dove away, cursing. "They're trying to get to the barn," Wyatt called out. "If Jessie's men reached the barn, they'd have cover to pin them down indefinitely, or worse, they could set it ablaze and let the fire spread." Charlotte reloaded with shaking hands, remembering Jessie's pattern. He never did his own dirty work if he could help it. He'd let his men take the risks while he waited for an opening. Another exchange of gunfire. One of the attackers cried out, and through the smoke, Charlotte saw him slump over his saddle. 3 left, plus Jessie. "Charlotte," Jessie's voice rang out during a lull. "This doesn't have to end badly. Your man's already bleeding. How long before I put him down for good?" She looked at Wyatt in alarm. Blood seeped through his shirt sleeve where a bullet had grazed him, but his face was set with determination. "I'm fine," he muttered, not taking his eyes off the window. "Flesh wound." The morning sun was climbing higher, glinting off gun barrels and making it harder to see. Charlotte wiped sweat from her eyes, trying to track movement outside. Where was Jessie? She'd lost sight of him in the chaos. A crash from the back of the house made her spin around. One of Jessie's men had broken through the kitchen door. Charlotte fired the shotgun, but he was already diving sideways. The blast tore chunks from the door frame as he rolled behind the overturned table. "Wyatt!" she screamed, but he couldn't leave his position. 2 riders were pressing the front. The man behind the table rose up, pistol aimed at her. Time slowed. Charlotte saw his finger tightening on the trigger, knew she couldn't reload in time. This was how it would end. Then, at least Wyatt would— the crack of a rifle, but not from outside. The attacker jerked, looking down in surprise at the red spreading across his chest. He toppled forward, revealing Jesse standing in the doorway behind him, Wyatt's spare rifle in his hands. "Can't have anyone killing you but me, darlin'," Jesse said with that devil's grin. Charlotte stared, shotgun still half raised. "You shot your own man." He was getting sloppy. "Besides, this is between us." Jesse stepped over the body like it was nothing. "Though I got to say, your rancher's putting up more fight than I expected." The gunfire from outside had stopped. Charlotte could hear Wyatt moving carefully in the front room, probably trying to get an angle on the remaining attackers. "Call them off, Jesse," she said. "Let's end this. Just you and me." Tempting, but see, I've got plans for your man. Thought I'd let you watch him die slow. Payment for all the trouble you've caused me. "I never caused you anything. I just left." "You betrayed me." The mask slipped, revealing the rage beneath. 5 years. Charlotte, 5 years I kept you fed, clothed, protected. And you threw it all away for what? This?" He gestured around the modest kitchen with contempt. "Playing house with some broken-down widower? I'd rather have this than all the stolen money in the world." Jesse's face darkened. He raised the rifle, but Charlotte was already moving. She threw herself sideways as he fired, feeling the bullet tear through her skirts, rolling behind the stove. She frantically reloaded the shotgun. "Wyatt!" she called. "Kitchen!" She heard him curse, then running footsteps. Another rifle shot from Jesse splintered the wood above her head. Charlotte popped up and fired, forcing Jesse to duck back into the doorway. The shotgun blast tore chunks from the frame, but missed him. Wyatt appeared in the interior doorway, pistol drawn. Jesse saw him at the same moment and swung the rifle around. The 2 men fired simultaneously. Jesse's shot went wide, shattering a lamp. Wyatt's caught Jesse in the shoulder, spinning him back. The rifle clattered across the floor. Jesse clutched his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers, but managed to draw his pistol left-handed. Charlotte was closer. Without thinking, she lunged for Wyatt's fallen rifle. Jesse turned at her movement. Their eyes met across the kitchen, predator and prey, reversed now. Charlotte saw the moment he recognized it too. "You won't," he said, but uncertainty flickered in his voice. "Not you, not my sweet, soft Charlotte. I'm not yours," she said quietly. "I never was." "Charlotte?" Wyatt started forward, but she held up a hand, stopping him. This had to be her choice, her ending. Jesse tried his old smile, the one that used to make her forgive anything. "Come on, darling. We both know you don't have it in you. Put the gun down. We'll go away together. Start fresh. Mexico. Like I promised." "No, I'll forget all this. The betrayal, the rancher, everything. Clean slate." He took a step toward her, hand extended. "You loved me once." "I know you did." "I loved who I thought you were," Charlotte said. "But that man never existed, did he?" Jesse's expression hardened. "Fine, but if I can't have you—" His pistol started to rise, not toward her but toward Wyatt. Charlotte pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked hard against her shoulder. Jesse looked down at the spreading red on his chest, genuine surprise on his face. He tried to speak, but only blood came out. The pistol fell from nerveless fingers as he sank to his knees. "Jesse," Charlotte heard herself say, the rifle drooping in her hands. He looked up at her one last time, and for just a moment, she saw the boy she'd met all those years ago, charming, lost, already broken beyond repair. Then his eyes went vacant, and he toppled sideways onto the blood-stained floor. The silence was deafening. Charlotte stared at Jesse's still form, unable to process what she'd done. She'd killed him. The man she'd once thought she'd marry, have children with, grow old beside. Her hands started to shake. "Charlotte," Wyatt's voice, gentle but urgent. "We need to check outside. The others—" A shout from the yard cut him off. "Rourke, where the hell are you?" Charlotte recognized the voice. Reb Paulson, one of Jesse's regular crew. Wyatt moved to the window, peering out carefully. "One rider heading for the hills," he reported. "Other ones down by the barn, not moving." They waited, tense, but no more shots came. After several minutes, Wyatt ventured onto the porch. Charlotte followed, still clutching the rifle. The yard looked like a battlefield. Broken glass, splintered wood, the sharp smell of gunpowder. One of Jesse's men lay crumpled near the barn, another by the well. The third had fled, probably figuring the job wasn't worth dying for now that Jesse was gone. "It's over," Wyatt said quietly. Charlotte nodded, unable to speak. It was over. But as she looked back toward the kitchen where Jesse's body lay, she wondered if it would ever really be finished. Could you kill the past? Or did it stay with you always? A shadow you carried no matter how far you ran? Wyatt's hand touched her shoulder. "You did what you had to do. He would have killed us both." "I know." Her voice came out raw. "I know, but he was part of your life, part of who you were." Wyatt turned her to face him. "It's all right to grieve that. Charlotte, doesn't make what you did wrong." She let the rifle fall and pressed her face against his chest. Finally, letting the tears come, she cried for the girl she'd been, for the dreams that had turned to nightmares, for the waste of a life that could have been different if Jesse had chosen another path. Wyatt held her through it all, solid and steady as the earth itself. When her sobs finally quieted, he kissed the top of her head. "We need to ride to town," he said gently. "Get the sheriff." "There'll be questions." Charlotte pulled back, wiping her eyes. "What do I tell them?" "The truth. They came here threatening us. We defended ourselves." He touched her face. "Tom Morrison knows my character, and he's got influence. It'll be all right." But would it? Charlotte looked at the blood on her hands, Jesse's blood, and wondered if she'd ever wash it clean. Not just from her skin, but from her soul. "Charlotte," Wyatt's voice drew her back. "Look at me." She met his steady gray eyes. "You're not alone in this," he said firmly. "Whatever comes next, we face it together. You hear me? Together," she echoed, and found she could almost believe it, as they prepared for the ride to town, covering the bodies with blankets and securing the damaged house as best they could. Charlotte felt something she hadn't expected, not just grief or guilt, but a strange lightness. The weight she'd carried for so long, fear of Jesse finding her, guilt over her past, the constant looking over her shoulder, was lifting. She was free, bloodied and shaken, but free. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning mist. A new day, Charlotte thought. Whatever judgment awaited them in town, whatever the future held, it would be a life without Jesse's shadow falling across it. She could live with that. She could build something clean and good with Wyatt, raise children who would never know the fear she'd known, create a home where love meant safety, not possession. The ride to town seemed endless, though it was only 8 miles. Wyatt's shoulder had stopped bleeding, but Charlotte insisted he let her drive the wagon while he kept watch with his rifle. The bodies of Jesse and his men lay in the back, covered with canvas. Every bump in the road made Charlotte think of Jesse's face in those final moments, surprised, betrayed, finally empty. Sheriff John Hartley was a steady man in his 50s, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened to their account in his office while his deputy took notes. Charlotte told the truth, Jesse's threats, the attack, the self-defense. She didn't mention the years she'd spent with Jesse, and Wyatt didn't either. "Jesse Rourke," the sheriff said finally, leaning back in his chair. "Been tracking reports on him for 2 years? Train robbery in Colorado, bank in Tucson, that stage holdup near Cheyenne." He studied Charlotte. "Says here he traveled with a woman, dark hair, green eyes, goes by different names." Charlotte's heart hammered, but she kept her voice level. "He came to the ranch looking for me. We'd known each other years ago in St. Louis. When I wouldn't go with him, he came back with his men. And you shot him to save my fiancé's life. Jesse was about to kill him." Sheriff Hartley nodded slowly. "Tom Morrison vouches for you both. Says McCall here is solid as they come, and you've been nothing but respectable since arriving." He closed the file. "Seems clear enough. Self-defense against wanted criminals. There's even a reward. $500 for Rourke. 100 each for the others if we can identify them." Charlotte felt sick. Blood money. "Give it to the church," she said quickly. "Or the school. We don't want it." The sheriff raised an eyebrow, but nodded. "Generous of you." He stood. "You folks are free to go. I'll need you to sign some papers, but that can wait a day or two. You've been through enough." Outside, Wyatt helped Charlotte onto the wagon seat. His hand lingered on hers. "You did well in there." "He knew," Charlotte said quietly. "The sheriff. He knew about me and Jesse." "Maybe, but he also knows you're not that person anymore." Wyatt climbed up beside her. "Come on, let's go home." Home. The word settled around her like a warm blanket. The doctor insisted on properly treating Wyatt's shoulder, cleaning and bandaging the graze. While they waited, Tom Morrison appeared, his weathered face creased with concern. "Heard about the trouble," he said, shaking Wyatt's good hand. "Glad you're both all right." "Tom, this is Charlotte," Wyatt said. "My fiancée." Morrison tipped his hat. "Ma'am, sorry we're meeting under such circumstances." He turned back to Wyatt. "My boys are already at your place, boarding up the windows and cleaning up. Least we could do." "That's not necessary," Wyatt began. "It's what neighbors do." Morrison cut him off. "Besides, Sarah would tan my hide if she knew I let you handle this alone." He paused. "She'd be glad you found someone. Wyatt. Real glad." Wyatt's throat worked. "Thank you, Tom." When they finally returned to the ranch, the sun was setting. True to Morrison's word, his men had repaired what damage they could. The broken windows were boarded over, the blood scrubbed from the floors. Only the acrid smell of gunpowder and the bullet holes in the walls remained as evidence of the morning's violence. Charlotte stood in the kitchen doorway, unable to enter. This was where she'd killed Jesse, where she'd watched the life leave his eyes. How could she cook here, eat here, live here with that memory staining everything? "We'll fix it," Wyatt said behind her. "New boards, fresh paint. Make it ours again. The blood is gone. Tom's men are thorough." He touched her elbow gently. "But if you want, we could move the kitchen to the other side of the house. Build new." "Build new," Charlotte repeated. Yes, that's what they needed. Not to cover over the past, but to create something entirely theirs. That night, neither of them wanted to sleep inside. They made a camp in the yard, close enough to the house for safety, but under the open sky. The stars were brilliant in the clear air, countless and eternal. "I never thanked you," Charlotte said, wrapped in blankets beside the small fire. "For standing with me, for not asking questions about my past." "Nothing to thank me for." Wyatt poked at the fire with a stick. "We all have histories. What matters is who we choose to be now. I helped him, Jesse, not with the violent things, but I held horses while he robbed places, kept watch, made myself not think about where the money came from. You were young, in love. He used that. I let him use it." Charlotte pulled the blanket tighter. "That's what I have to live with. I could have walked away sooner, but I didn't. Not until Colorado. Not until I saw that marshal die." Wyatt was quiet for a moment. "I knew Sarah was pregnant before she told me," he said finally. "Saw the signs, the sickness in the mornings, the way she'd touch her belly when she thought I wasn't looking. But I pretended not to know because I was scared. Scared of being a father, of the responsibility. So I kept finding reasons to go to town, to play cards and drink." His voice roughened. "The night of the fire, I knew she wanted me to stay home. Saw it in her eyes, but I went anyway. Charlotte reached over and took his hand. "I've had 2 years to think about it," he continued. "All the what-ifs. What if I'd stayed home? What if I'd admitted what I knew? What if I'd been the man she deserved instead of a coward?" He squeezed Charlotte's hand. "Can't change it. Can only try to be better." They sat in silence, watching the fire die to embers. Finally, Charlotte spoke. "We're quite a pair, aren't we? The coward and the accomplice." "No," Wyatt said firmly. "We're survivors, and we're going to build something good here. Charlotte, something clean and honest and worth having. Together. Together." The next days passed in a blur of activity. The minister from Sageville came out, a young man named Reverend Mills, who seemed unfazed by the recent violence. He agreed to perform the wedding in 3 days' time. "Nothing fancy," Charlotte said. "Just us and a few witnesses. The marriage is what matters, not the trappings." Reverend Mills agreed. Word had spread about the attack, and neighbors Charlotte had never met came by with food and offers of help. The women especially seemed determined to embrace her, perhaps seeing one of their own who'd survived the worst the frontier could offer. Mrs. Morrison, Tom's wife, arrived with fabric for a wedding dress. "Nothing fancy," she said, echoing Charlotte's words with a smile. "But a bride should have something new." As Charlotte worked on the simple dress, she found herself thinking about the girl who'd run away with Jesse all those years ago. That girl had dreamed of a different wedding. Elaborate gown, church full of people, Jesse handsome and charming at the altar. That girl hadn't known that love could be a weapon, that charm could hide cruelty. This wedding would be nothing like those dreams, and Charlotte was grateful for it. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and cold. Charlotte stood before the small mirror in her room, soon to be the spare room again, and adjusted the simple blue dress she'd sewn. No veil, no flowers, just a clean dress and her mother's small gold cross at her throat. A knock at the door. "Charlotte," Wyatt's voice. "You ready?" She opened the door to find him in his best shirt and string tie, freshly shaved, looking younger and almost shy. His eyes widened when he saw her. "You're beautiful," he said simply. "You clean up pretty well yourself. Mr. McCall." He offered her his arm. "Shall we go get married?" The ceremony was held in the yard, the mountains as their cathedral. Tom and Mary Morrison stood as witnesses, along with Doc Henderson and his wife. Reverend Mills spoke simple words about love and commitment, about building new lives on the ashes of the old. When he asked if anyone objected, Charlotte tensed despite herself. But no ghost appeared. No voice from the past shattered the moment. Jesse was gone. Truly gone. "Do you, Wyatt James McCall, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was strong. "Certain. Do you, Charlotte Marie Bellamy, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" For just a moment, she thought of another name, her real name, the one she'd left behind with Jesse. Then she let it go. Charlotte Bellamy was who she chose to be. "I do. Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife." Wyatt's kiss was gentle, a promise more than passion. Around them, their small gathering applauded. Mary Morrison wiped tears from her eyes. The wedding dinner was simple but joyful. Everyone crowded into the house that still showed scars from the attack, but with laughter and conversation filling the rooms. Those scars seemed less important. This was what mattered. Community, connection, the choice to keep living despite loss and pain. As the sun set and their guests prepared to leave, Tom Morrison pulled Wyatt aside. Charlotte caught only fragments of their conversation, but she heard Tom say, "Sarah would be proud of you, boy. You found your way back to the living." That night, in their marriage bed, Charlotte traced the half-healed scar on Wyatt's shoulder. "No more secrets between us," she whispered. "No more running, no more hiding." He agreed, catching her hand and kissing her palm. "Whatever comes, we face it together." "Together," Charlotte echoed, and sealed it with a kiss. Outside, the Wyoming wind sang across the plains, carrying away the last echoes of gunfire and grief. Inside, Two broken people worked on becoming whole, building a future on honesty and hope and the kind of love that comes from truly seeing another person and choosing them anyway. It wasn't the life Charlotte had imagined as a young girl. It was better. It was real. And it was hers. Spring arrived slowly that year, melting the snow in patches and revealing the earth beneath. Charlotte stood in what would become her garden, turning soil that had never known cultivation. The rich, dark earth crumbled between her fingers, full of promise. "Starting small," Wyatt said, bringing her a bucket of compost from the barn. "But by next year, we'll have enough vegetables to see us through winter." Charlotte smiled up at him. 3 months married, and she still felt that flutter when he looked at her with such quiet pride. "My mother had a garden back in Ohio. Tomatoes, beans, squash. I used to help her when I was little. What happened to her? Fever took her when I was 15. Father followed a year later. That's when I went to St. Louis, looking for work." She didn't add that it was where she'd met Jesse, working in the same hotel where he'd been dealing cards. That Charlotte felt like a different person entirely. Wyatt knelt beside her, taking a handful of soil. "Good land here. Things grow strong when they've got good roots." They worked together through the morning, marking out rows, planning where each crop would go. The bullet holes in the house walls had been patched, new windows installed. The chicken coop was rebuilt, now home to a dozen new hens. Life was returning to the ranch, stubborn as the grass pushing through remnants of snow. After lunch, Charlotte heard a wagon approaching. Her hand still went instinctively to where she used to keep her shotgun, but the fear was fading. Jesse was gone. His men scattered. The past couldn't ride up to her door anymore. It was Doc Henderson's wagon, but the woman beside him wasn't his wife. Young, maybe 20, with a baby in her arms and defeat written in every line of her body. "Mrs. McCall," Doc Henderson called out. "Got someone here might need your help." The woman climbed down carefully, holding her baby close. Charlotte could see the bruises on her arms, the hollow look of someone who'd been running too long. "This is Ruth Carter," Doc Henderson said. She needs a place to stay for a bit." Charlotte understood immediately. She saw her younger self in Ruth's frightened eyes, recognized the way she held herself ready to flee. "Of course," Charlotte said, ignoring Wyatt's questioning look. "Come inside. You look exhausted." Ruth followed her into the kitchen, sinking into a chair like she might never get up again. The baby, a boy, maybe 6 months old, whimpered softly. "When did you last eat?" Charlotte asked, already reaching for the bread. "Yesterday, maybe." Ruth's voice was barely above a whisper. "My husband, he's looking for me." "Doc said you might understand." Charlotte met her eyes. "I do understand. You're safe here." While Ruth ate, Charlotte held the baby, remembering Jesse's cruel words about children. He'd never wanted them, said they'd slow them down. Now, feeling the warm weight of this small life, Charlotte understood it wasn't about speed. It was about control. A woman with a child was harder to possess completely. Wyatt took Doc Henderson aside, and Charlotte heard their low conversation. When the men came back in, Wyatt's face was set in hard lines. "Your husband won't find you here," he told Ruth firmly. "You have my word on that." Ruth started crying then, silent tears of relief and exhaustion. Charlotte settled her in the small room off the kitchen, her old room, and took the baby while Ruth slept. "His name is Samuel," Ruth had whispered before closing her eyes. "After my father." That evening, as Charlotte prepared supper for 4 instead of 2, Wyatt came up behind her. "We can't take in every woman running from a bad man," he said softly. "I know." Charlotte turned to face him. "But we can take in this one, just until she finds her feet." Wyatt studied her face, then nodded. "All right, but if her husband comes here, we'll handle it." Charlotte finished. "Like we handled Jesse." Ruth stayed a week, then 2. She was a hard worker once her strength returned, helping with chores and minding Samuel while Charlotte worked the garden. Slowly, her story emerged. A husband who'd seemed charming at first. Isolation from family. The gradual escalation from harsh words to harsh hands. "I should have left sooner," Ruth said one afternoon, watching Samuel crawl in the grass. "But I kept thinking he'd change back to who he was when we met." "They never change back," Charlotte said quietly, "because that person never existed. It was just bait for the trap." Ruth looked at her with new understanding. "You really do know." "I know. Word must have spread somehow that the McCall Ranch was a safe haven. Over the summer, 2 more women arrived. One stayed only a few days before family in California wired money for train fare. The other, an older woman named Agnes, had nowhere else to go. She moved into the barn's tack room, fixed it up cozy, and proved invaluable with the chickens. "Running a boarding house now?" Tom Morrison asked one day, but his eyes were kind. "Running a ranch," Wyatt corrected. "Just happens we've got extra hands to help." It wasn't charity. Not exactly. Everyone worked. Everyone contributed. Ruth turned out to be excellent with a needle and took in mending from town. Agnes sold eggs at market. The ranch, which had barely supported 2, now sustained 5. And Charlotte's garden grew, spreading beyond her original modest plans. Tomatoes climbed stakes, beans wound up poles, squash sprawled across the ground. She found herself teaching Ruth and Agnes what her mother had taught her, passing on knowledge like an inheritance. One hot July afternoon, Charlotte was weeding when she felt a familiar wave of nausea. She sat back on her heels, hand going to her belly. Could it be? She and Wyatt had been trying, but after months with no result. She'd begun to wonder if she could even have children. That evening, she told him her suspicions. The joy that transformed his face made her eyes fill with tears. "A baby," he breathed, pulling her close. "Our baby." "It's early," Charlotte warned. "Anything could happen. But right now, today, there's hope." He kissed her softly. "That's enough." As summer turned to fall, Charlotte's pregnancy progressed. The morning sickness passed, replaced by energy that had her working dawn to dusk. The garden produced abundantly, and they spent long days preserving food for winter, canning, drying, storing roots in the cellar. Ruth's husband never appeared. Word came that he'd been killed in a saloon fight in Denver, and while Ruth cried, Charlotte saw the relief in her eyes. She was truly free now. "I should move on," Ruth said one evening as they all sat around the dinner table. "You've done so much already." "Where would you go?" Charlotte asked practically. "Samuel's happy here. You've got work, friends, safety. Why leave?" "She's right," Agnes added. "Besides, who'd help me with the chickens?" Wyatt cleared his throat. "Been thinking about building another cabin. Small place, past the barn. Ranch is growing. Makes sense to have proper housing for employees." Ruth's eyes widened. "You'd do that?" "Already started cutting logs," Wyatt admitted. And so their strange family grew stranger still. A widower and his pregnant mail-order bride. A young mother escaping violence. An old woman with nowhere else to go. Tom Morrison joked that Wyatt was building his own town, but there was respect in his voice. The first snow came early, dusting the mountains while the valley still wore autumn colors. Charlotte stood in her garden, now harvested and bedded down for winter, one hand on her swelling belly. This patch of earth had been empty in spring, like her womb, like her hope. Now it had produced abundance, food for their table, work for their hands, purpose for their days. Come spring, it would grow again, and by then she'd have a baby at her breast, a new life in this place that had seen so much death. She thought of Jesse's grave in the town cemetery, marked only with his initials and dates. She'd visited it once, alone, standing silent in the rain. Not to mourn him, exactly, but to acknowledge what had been, to say goodbye properly to that frightened girl who'd loved a fiction. "You coming in?" Wyatt called from the porch. "Supper's getting cold." Charlotte turned from the garden, from the past, from the ghosts that grew fainter with each passing day. Through the lit windows, she could see their makeshift family gathering, Ruth bouncing Samuel on her knee, Agnes setting the table, Wyatt ladling stew into bowls. "Coming?" she called back, and went inside to warmth and laughter and life. That winter, as snow piled deep and her baby grew strong within her, Charlotte would sometimes wake in the dark hours and marvel at the journey that had brought her here. From St. Louis boarding house to Wyoming ranch, from Jesse's possession to Wyatt's partnership, from isolation to community. The scars remained, on the house walls, in Wyatt's nightmares, in the way she still tensed at unexpected hoofbeats. But scars were just proof of survival, marks of battles won. They didn't define the future. In February, as her time drew near, Charlotte walked carefully to the window and looked out at the snow-covered land. Soon the snow would melt. The garden would be planted again. New life would push through earth that had known violence and been watered with tears. Wyatt joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind, hands gentle on her belly. "No regrets?" he asked softly. Charlotte leaned back against him, feeling their child move beneath their joined hands. Beyond the window, smoke rose from Ruth's new cabin, and Agnes scattered feed for the chickens, and the mountains stood eternal against the winter sky. "None," she said, and meant it. "We're home." In the spring, when Charlotte's son was born squalling and strong, when the garden burst forth with new growth, when Ruth planted her own small plot beside the cabin, life had truly taken root in soil that had seemed too damaged to nurture anything. They named the baby Thomas, after Wyatt's father. He had his father's gray eyes and his mother's dark hair. And when Charlotte held him to her breast that first time, she felt the last chains of the past fall away. This was what Jesse had never understood, that love wasn't possession but possibility. Not a cage, but a garden where things could grow wild and free and beautiful, where broken people could plant new seeds and trust in the harvest, where even the most damaged soil, with care and time and hope, could bloom again. Thank you all for listening to our story today around the Wild West Campfire. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect across the miles. Just like the frontier brought people together. If you enjoyed Charlotte and Wyatt's journey, please subscribe to the Wild West Campfire channel for more tales of love, redemption, and survival in the American West. Share your thoughts about the story. What touched your heart? What would you have done in Charlotte's boots? Until next time, partners, keep those campfires burning and those stories flowing.